All right, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have a 22 Neltharion's Lair, and for the week's cycle we are Fortified, Storming, and Bursting. This is a really great week for us to get invites because Mass Dispel is just so OP in this game. And off the bat, I wanted to say this key was near perfect. It was such a good example of so many things until 2% on the last boss, where we have a full wipe and the key is lost. So if you want to have a good laugh, you can go look at that. I've never posted a failed key, but obviously they happen. The only reason I wasn't tilted about this is because I already had the points. So I thought I would use it as an example anyway to talk about everything good that happened in this key. But before we get going, talents. So for pre-side, we don't need Disease Dispel. There's no need for it here. I don't even think there's a need for double mass or improved mass. I think maybe I'm seeing more and more people go into mind control, which I'm eager to do, but not with a pug tank. I think it takes a lot of coordination to live. And then on the discipline side, this is kind of my tried and true spec. I've been running this for a long time. It's just what I prefer. I really like the Mindbender playstyle. I think it's really fun. I have toyed around with the idea of maybe speccing into a cooldown reduction for Radiance, but I'm not there yet. I'm still taking Long Schism. I think that is so great because our second Dark Reprimand in our Shadow Covenant window will fall on Schism, and that really just amps your output, HPS, DPS, your single target, all of that. But I will say I'm tempted going into Tyrannical Week to switch it up and go for the more, let's call it recommended build. I think the best play for a Disc Priest right now might be one that's like versatile and you can like switch back and forth between Fort and Tyran. Jury's still out on that. We'll see how it goes. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk about in this intro video was a change to my rotation. And this is the biggest change I've had in a long time. And I'm honestly really sorry that I didn't catch it sooner. But there was a mistake in my rotation, or let's not call it a mistake, but an oversight. I did do research, but I didn't really find any information on this, and it was something I just didn't figure out on my own. So it was actually thanks to someone in my comment section giving me a really wonderful critique that kind of was like a light bulb moment for me. And truth be told, that's my favorite part about this YouTube channel so far. Is I do my best to teach what I've learned and kind of share, the research I've done and et cetera, et cetera. But every now and then, I don't know everything. And if someone sees something that I've missed, it is just so great to have someone like help a bitch out. So anyway, the rotation, if you've been following along with my channel, I would say, what did I say? So Schism, Shadow Covenant, Mindbender as your opener, your first three. However, since Mindbender is so finite and so important with our torment spells and we have so much to do within our window, it is not a good idea to put both of your Dark Reprimands within it. So if you wanted to imagine this, we have Schism, Shadow Covenant, Dark Reprimand, because that's kind of a long channel that lasts more than a global. And after the first Dark Reprimand is our Mindbender. And then from there we do Mind Blast, Death. We have to put that Death really early. And then everything else kind of falls into place. So yeah, I want to put one Dark Reprimand before Mindbender and one after. And that really just really eases a lot of the button bloat that you find. 4-piece will help with a lot of the button bloat. But we're aiming for base value 7 torments per window and 8 torments in a window if you've really optimized it with your pull. And you're going to get those that 7th and 8th torment through picking up extra executes with Shadow Word Death. So having nameplates that really help you see where execute ranges are is really going to empower your Mindbender play, because you really have to be quick to target execute ranges and snipe them out. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a lot of value if you only get 5 or 6 torments in a window. You really need to aim for 7 at least, and 8 if you're lucky, let's say. So anyway, that's all I want to say about rotation. We're going to have a lot of examples in this key. I guess maybe the last thing I wanted to say is the intention behind my videos. And I think there are some people that tune in and watch it all the way through, and I love that. I think that's really great. I appreciate those who do that. But I mark these by bosses. I mark chapters by bosses. So I think at best, maybe if you see me post a video for the week and you know you've failed on one boss before, perhaps go look how I did that boss. Or if there's a trash pull that you failed on, maybe go skip ahead and see how I did that trash pull. I don't think you necessarily have to watch the full video to get something from it. And oftentimes I think just watching how someone else does it might spark a light bulb moment. So that being said, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, so we are about to get going here, and this is a double priest group. Always a really strong comp if you ask me. And my assignment for PI is our Shaman. And that was a little hack right there. If you jump in early, it helps the countdown out. And off the top here, we have really not much to worry about. We do have frontals. Your fear is a great spell to cancel those out. So I open with a dot and penance just to start spreading my dots around, and I'm faded, of course. High priority is getting a full Harsh Discipline stack. There's PI, Schism, Shadow Covenant, Dark Reprimand, Mindbender, and then I reach for all my Torment spells. And you'll notice in this group with KUI nameplates, I have the more healthy mobs stand out as a darker red for your focus targets. And I believe that was 7 torments. And here we have these lurkers lurking. And yep. So there was their frontal, and that was a great fear bomb opportunity. It might not have hit anyone, but it also might have. And I think our Shaman stood in that green ground damage. I'm actually not too sure what goes on with that ground damage. It like one-shots people. Does anyone know? Is that how it's supposed to be? Like it's happened to me before, and I try and like hella dodge it. So as the pull is getting going here, I like to always use penance to spread my dot. And the biggest change with my rotation change is we do need a full Harsh Discipline proc before we go into our window. Yeah, so that really wasn't my best play. I'm not sure where those guys came from in the back, but they were all aggroed on me, and I really didn't want to die this early in the key, so I threw a pain sup out on myself. But oh well. And another thing I want to say is Shadow Word Death is just so vital to our rotation now. A lot of times I will pay real close attention to people who are about to go into execute range, and you always want to put both of your Shadow Word Deaths on cooldown. Yep, both priests had levitates in for the win, and we had 2 grips in for the win. So the way this boss goes, first stomp, I assign my Rapture. High priority here is get a Harsh Discipline proc. PIs are out. It's always nice to throw a dot on these adds, even though we are non-tyrannical, or at least use your penance to dot them. And with this shatter, that is all I track with bigwigs. And it is really important to note the shatter cast is quite long too, so you can't just operate off the bigwig's timer. That's timing when the cast begins, and then the cast is like 3 seconds. So with that Rapture, I kind of delayed it. I was able to coat the entire group in shields, and I refresh shields after. And for this one, we had no defensives out in group, so that was a pre-wall. And right after the shatter was a Radiant Providence. And for this next one, I believe I Barrier. Yep. Free Barrier, trying to top up the lobies. I shielded myself. And here's a Shadow Covenant. Mindbender, Mind Blast, Death. And another thing I want to say is when we take one of our Dark Reprimands out of our window, we have so much more room for other spells. Primarily what I'm saying is we don't need to lose Expiation. So since we have so much more room within our window, I use that time to refresh my dot now, and I'm not losing as much value on Expiation, and I'm still getting all of my torments. Here is our second Rapture. Coated the entire group and then recoded after. It looks like I favored the Shaman there because he was the lowest health. I refreshed his shield first. And here is a beautiful 8 Torment boss. And right here was a preemptive paints up on myself. Perhaps I should have just walled, but that's okay. And tank was getting a little bit low. That was a quick defensive penance into the tank just to recoup a little bit of health. I will say knowing when and when not to defensive penance is one of the best skills you can develop as a Disc Priest. A defensive penance will be your best single target heal, and sometimes you have to do that. So when it comes to Harsh Discipline and your penance procs, it's always best to sit on a proc if you can and always fiend for those stacks. You never want a proc and not have it. But again, Rapture for the win. You always want to coat the group before and after a shatter. And this is one really nice change I've had to my UI. If you look at the breaker, there is a little avalanche timer hooked to his nameplate. You can do that for pretty much any spell, but I don't think it's necessary for all spells. But something like that avalanche, it is really nice to be able to predict it rather than being entirely reactionary. And if you pay close attention to my spells here, we're about to have a really nice 8 Torment window where my cast sequence is Death, Mind Blast, Death. And I don't always play them in a sequence like that. I think a lot of times I'll go Death, Death, and then get my final Mind Blast. But the mob's health was not going to allow that many globals. So if you align it, Death, Mind Blast, Death, the final global happened after the mob was dead, and we had all 8 torments. So another thing I've been really trying to do is maximize my Protector of the Frail. So whenever we are in between pulls like that, it is a perfect time just to keep your shield on cooldown. That priest about trolled me. Okay, PI's out, get a Harsh Discipline, reatone the tank, Dark Reprimand, then Mindbender, and then reach for all my torments. And if you pay attention to my active dot, I'm not casting a torment spell without a dot active. And that was a pretty good Mindbender there. I got 7 torments, not 8. Again, you're only going to get that 8th Torment if there's someone in execute range at the start of your window. So you get 2 executes in the front, 2 in the back. But what I was saying about shielding and Protector of the Frail, I've also really been trying to... I notice I don't play Rapture that much, and I think in a lot of cases it's fine. You don't necessarily need it. But coming out of Mindbender and Shadow Covenant is a great time just to instantly start dropping globals. And back to what I was saying, especially if either of your pain sups are on cooldown, high priority is to play Rapture and literally spam as many globals as you can. Yeah, so what I've been trying to do is, as long as I have a pain sup on cooldown, I move Rapture basically to the top of my priority. What am I saying? Okay, so I don't think you necessarily have to kill that little totem, just don't touch it. But this guy being fortified, great, there's a double execute at the front of the window. I don't think we'll get another one though. So this big guy, the Hulk, being fortified, it's actually a pretty intense tank buster mob. You'll see there, the white dotted lines was the targeted casts weak aura, helping me see that he's about to get slammed. But especially since the slam is intense, the dot is intense, it's a great place to help him out with a pain sup, maybe a barrier. Could have even rolled Rapture. There's that avalanche timer, so handy. So handy. So we have quite a bit of time until boss. I think we're going to play another PI here. Yep, there it is. And I've talked about this in the past when it comes to when I play my Radiance. Uh-oh, what's happening back there? Okay, so that's a really good note. The totem can aggro people. So I kind of saw it coming and I faded just to make sure I was not on that aggro table. And sitting out a Rapture. That rogue is lucky just to help the pickup here. But back to what I was saying about Radiance and when to cast Radiance. I always preach delaying it the best you can because it kind of, in a sense, will prolong. There was another really good pain sup, anticipating that attack. But the more you can delay your Radiance, it'll prolong your healing output window and just make it longer. It adds more coverage rather than if you Radiance early. Sometimes you have to Radiance early, but if you can Radiance late, it's just a little bit better. A couple things to perhaps keep in mind is if you can use your star before you refresh with Radiance, or at least refresh your dot before you Radiance, or Solace before you Radiance. Those 3 spells in particular don't yield much atonement healing. And if you can get those out of the way before you Radiance, it just kind of empowers the latter half of your window. Hope that makes sense. And with these pulls, there is a lot of spike damage, to be honest. I believe the priest here actually, if I remember correctly, has one mind controlled. So even as a disc priest, I think perhaps that's a good play. Pick up that dominate mind. Everyone's getting hit. Eek. Okay, so right there, his mind control broke. He was about to get pwned, and a quick fear just helped out that pickup for the tank. That's a rare scenario where you need to fear, a priest picking up aggro. But in that case, I knew he had a dominate mind, and I was anticipating him pulling hard aggro on someone. And as soon as that nameplate popped up, here. Sometimes all you need is about 1 second, to buy time. Yeah. Okay, so on this boss, non-tyrannical, not much of a problem. You should try and aim for 2 Shadow Covenants in this first round, so you just gotta pump. And with this Strike of the Mountain, I think we've all probably figured it out by now, but you don't need to be too hasty. I think even being too hasty will F you up. But that's one. It looks like I'm only tracking 2 items. I could probably even take off Stance of the Mountain. So I think maybe just track Strike of the Mountain because that's the most deadliest mechanic. But I try and give myself a speed boost prior. No speed boost that time. But I wait for them to come up. I hold right click with my mouse. I adjust my angle and walk out in quick succession. But usually I speed boost. I run Body and Soul, controversial play, but I think having speed, I look at it as being very defensive. If you can get yourself out of something quickly, or maybe help get someone else out of something quickly. I just really like it. I give it to myself all the time, and I think with that mechanic, I usually just shield myself, and it helps me kind of scoot out. Yep, right there. Okay, so Harsh Discipline is fully procced. Here goes our window. Looks like this will be a 7 torment window, which is fine. But arguably, if I held for just a couple of seconds, I could have set myself up for an 8 torment window. Refreshed my dot, picked up 2 executes, and my last Mind Blast. Oh, ouch. So that last Mind Blast missed. I was just out of time, so that was actually a 6 torment. Sad. But to reiterate, I know I've floundered around on this, and I'm really sorry about that, not having more concrete answers for my viewers. But to get an optimal ramp with Mindbender, we need 2 full Harsh Discipline procs for Dark Reprimand, and the second Dark Reprimand kind of just happens throughout your window. But the first one now, since we're playing it before Mindbender, before any Mind Blasts, that was really nice feather play, we need to have a full Harsh Discipline procced before we go into our window. And that might have been a little bit of a hasty nab. Ouch, I have aggro on this guy. I faded. Yeah, so the problem there, I guess I could take half the blame when I gripped that Paladin out of the water. I don't think he yet touched that gator. So even though I was faded, he was not on his aggro table at all. And I was via healing. So yeah, I faded. I feared him to try and buy some time. But it just did not work out for me, but that is okay. I have aggro on that guy too. I think this pull could have gone a lot better if we were in Discord. But that's how it goes. Another thing about Shadow Word Death, especially if you have dots on your mob, is it's an insane amount of healing. So it's always good to kind of have your eyes attuned for, watching for those execute ranges. So even if you're not in Shadow Covenant Mindbender, it's still an immense amount of healing. So you should always keep an eye out for them and play those for fat heals. And these pulls can be, to be honest, I don't fully know the mechanics. I know the little grub that's walking around can metamorphosize, and you have to watch out for that. And here, we'll have to see how that lines up with the boss, but I think that was just a rapture drop to farm back my pain sup. And I have been doing that a lot. If I should have done it earlier, to be honest, but I think that death threw me off. If you have a boss coming up within a minute and a half and a pain sup needs refreshing, drop rapture and just spam it. And I think the reason I did that so late, well, one was because I was dead on that first pull and it really threw me off. But to start out on this worm boss is Shadow Covenant. So we open with Shadow Covenant and then raptures later, so it's fine. There's PI. And you want to kind of delay the Shadow Covenant because there's no damage at the front end of this boss. I refresh my dot, then my radiance. And it's not a bad idea too. I put wall on cooldown there at the front. There is a lot of damage in this boss, and I use all my pain sups basically for myself. So it's not bad to put wall on cooldown because it is a short cooldown. And here's my first rapture. And if you watch that back, it was a great rapture. I was using my Grid 2 to really maximize where my absorb values go. And on that topic with Grid 2 and absorb values, I really think a vertically stacked party frame is best. I know a lot of people stack it horizontally, and I just don't think you can really compare health values and or shield values that well if they're horizontal. You kind of need them to be on top of one another to compare. Okay, so we're out of spells. Now it's time for barrier. Okay, we had a death. Sad, but I had barrier down and the priest was just like nowhere near it. But quick res for the win. And thankfully we have these like intermissions here where he gets tongued. I think it happens like every 3 or so. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but it's really nice in these little reset moments just to drop mana. So I have plenty of mana, and I'm waiting for the phase to end before I drop cooldowns. So everyone was topped, everyone was atoned. I had another wall there. And I think we're in a really good place here because I get... Yep, so that was another 8 Torment window. I got 4 Shadow Word Deaths, 4 Mind Blasts. And now that Rapture is back up, that was another Rapture Q for the win. So that boss is really no joke. I would say if that were a tyrannical boss, we would need to bring in 1 more Poison Dispel. So we have a Shaman's Totem, which is great, and a Paladin has a single. But I think for tyrannical, you definitely are going to want 1 more person. So quick glance at my overall damage. I'm at 43.1. I love it. And bottom of the avoidable damage, which is where you want to be. And these guys don't play around. So you really got to pump everything you got. And I went ahead and pain sup myself. A lot of times, I feel like if I can live, it'll be fine. So I do consider pain sup a lot of times as just a personal. And right there, I was getting a little behind in heals. So that is the perfect time for a health pot. I think that's what happened there. And it looks like ultimately it was an unnecessary health pot, but it's better not to play around.
I am sorry, heroes. I must leave you now.
So I have no pain subs. This is a great time just to kind of spam shield out of combat. Yeah, whenever you have a moment out of combat, great time just to run shield. And here's a Rapture, noticing I'm farming that darker blue value on my bars. Getting in every single global. Refreshing it after one is 8 up. And straight into Shadow Covenant, where we really need to pump. I delayed my Radiance, which covers all the way through this double execute. And again with a quick Fear to help the Priest. And it looked like I missed my 7th Torment, which is sad. I had the opportunity, but I just started healing people. I do that sometimes, and I notice in hindsight, my Mindbender will have 1 or 2 seconds left, and I neglect him. So I bring him front and center, but still sometimes I lose my attention span or something. And this guy, if you have Fear, it's not a bad idea to just drop it to interrupt one of those discs. And this is when I notice that we are at 100% and it's boss time. We have a full 8 minutes to go. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't have any room to be disappointed today, go ahead and click away. Take from this what you will. This is just tragic from here on out. But I will say the Paladin, the Rogue, and the Shaman are pals. They're like in Discord together. And they're trying this reset thing or something, but the Rogue behind us failed. I think there was like a lack of coordination or the timing was off. But he failed that by also baiting that mechanic out there, and he died. So we just had a full wipe. We used the only res we had left to come back with a mass right here. And this was our last chance to get this right. We have no reses at the moment. We're going to try it again. But again, I don't know these guys. They're all playing together. I really disagree with the Paladin and his play here, and the Rogue. If you're doing a reset play, you just have to get it right. You don't have any room to mess up. And don't even get me started about these feathers, but I laid 3 feathers out for him now that I know what's going on to help him with a speedy recovery. Return. So here we go. No reses available. Gave him an atonement just for good measure. And he literally walks around all my feathers. That's great. And the way this boss works, you do want to just run. I run Shadow Covenant and Mindbender just on cooldown. You don't really need any group heals here. It's more of a tank buster fight. But I will say something I learned in watching myself back and doing some research. I don't think I played this boss perfectly. When it comes to the mechanics, you don't want to move a lot. So the way it works is the ad will spawn on the boss's left hip. So you kind of always want to be there. And here goes my next Shadow Covenant. We don't need any healing right here, but this is a great chance just to pump some DPS. And now that I am out of spells, it's Rapture time. And notice I'm using Grid 2, using every global of Rapture, refreshing shields as they are depleted. And things were getting a little bit crazy, so wall and barrier. So when it comes to the ad on Fortified, I don't think as a healer you really need to attack him. Using it, at your discretion, but I think that's more of a DPS mechanic here. I'm focusing boss. And it's really important to keep an eye on the tank's health. There are a lot of tank slams here, which I have loaded into my targeted cast's weak aura. You'll see his name highlight white. And we're approaching the sub 20 range. And right there was a health pot. Might not have needed it, but might have needed it. And there was a pain set for myself to be defensive. Harsh Discipline is ramped. And here we go, Shadow Covenant. But if you pay attention to both of the priests' position, that was a failed bait. And although it was on the Shadow Priest, I was also in the wrong spot. But we needed to be on the boss's left hip. And that wouldn't have happened. So here, if you look at my battle res timer, we currently have 0 reses, 5% health on the boss. I have Rapture in my book. And battle res just came available, and who does he choose to res? His friend, and the only person without a heal in the group, the rogue. At 4%, the rogue takes it, which is questionable too. I think he should have declined it and gotten me, to be honest. Rogue is dead. Boss is at 2%.
I am the shaper and forger of this world.
And we just did not have enough. So that is really sad, but looking back over at this, kind of analyzing what I could have done to make this better, I don't think you ever necessarily have to have made mistakes, but there's usually always something you could have done better. And if anyone has ever tried watching one of their plays back, I really recommend testing that out. I think when you watch yourself, you see a lot that you might not have in the moment. But watching that back over, I noticed on boss pull, I dropped my PI. I didn't cast it for about a minute, I don't think. So arguably that could have been the boss kill. I think our Shadow Priest didn't switch to the ad quick enough there at the end. That could have been our boss kill. I could have switched to the ad at the end. That might have been our boss kill. If you replay it, you'll notice the Shaman pulled aggro on the ad and died instantly, and then instantly onked and died again. So if he had maybe saved his onk until after the ad disappeared, that could have been the boss kill. If the rogue didn't throw that first time around and we had an extra battle res, that could have been the boss kill. If the Paladin didn't res the rogue, that could have been our boss kill. Just, it was too many things out of place, a lack of coordination, a lot of poor judgment calls, and that led to a failed key. So the only reason I'm not tilted about this again is I already had this timed. I was just doing this for YouTube. I wish I could have had this timed for YouTube, but I still think there's a lot of really good examples of how Disc and Mindbender can handle these situations, and I hope there's something you could have gained from this even in a failure. But yeah, again, if you glance at the avoidable damage, I was really low. My overall output, it was above 40, which is great. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and until next time, Disc out.